You hear like silly stuff about like go back from where you came from. Okay, so I have I have a grandmother from Poland, I have a grandfather from Argentina, and I have a grandmother that is few generations Bukhari from Jerusalem. Do you cut me in pieces and distribute me? Do I get to pick where to go? And how far back does this go back to where you came from apply? Because Arabs came here too in the 7th century. And America, you know, most of the people that live there today, their ancestors are not from there as well.
Correct.
And all the Syrian refugees, do they need to go too?
Welcome to the Whose Body Is It podcast. I'm your host, Isabella Malvin. For those who don't know me, I'm a life coach, a hypnotist, a former birth worker, and a former liberal feminist turned radical truth teller. On this podcast, you'll learn about the ideologies, industries, and technologies attempting to control our minds and bodies, such as transgender ideology, pornography, prostitution, and the many tentacles of the medical industrial complex. Together, we'll untangle patriarchal lies as you listen to jaw-dropping interviews with women from around the world. Warning, while listening to this podcast, you might find yourself triggered or perhaps notice where you've been biting your tongue on the issues that matter most to you. In the masterclasses available on my site, as well as my one-on-one coaching and hypnosis, you will learn to stop getting triggered by every freaking thing, learn to cultivate resilience, gain knowledge, and if we're working together one-on-one, stop unwanted behaviors and increase your self-confidence. You can book your first session and check out the masterclasses in the library at whosebodyisit.com. And I just want to say that it's because of your endless support that I'm able to interview amazing women, get their stories out, and produce regular content for you. So with that being said, please like, comment, and subscribe to my channel on YouTube. And if you're just listening in, leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and consider making a financial contribution via the link in my show notes. You can also support the podcast by getting your activist stickers. So my pro-woman stickers have the power to intercept transhumanist programming. So take a photo of your stickers out in the wild and tag me on Instagram at Whose Body Is It. Without further ado, let's get into this week's story. In today's episode, I speak with my friend Daniella Saar about the terrors of October 7th, the rise in global anti-Semitism, including the riots on college campuses, the reality of sharing borders with enemy states, and the ethical concerns of awarding a so-called Palestinian journalist for photographing murdered Israeli woman Shani Louk as her lifeless body was driven to Gaza by Hamas terrorists on October 7th. If you're Jewish, you've probably been asked, why don't the Jews in Israel just go back to where they came from? Daniella discusses the sheer impossibility of this anti-Zionist trope, the reality of descending from Holocaust survivors, as she laments the 2024 reality of Israelis to consider where they might hide their children in the face of another on-ground invasion. Daniella also discusses how her politics have changed since the war and why she continues to send her son to a school of Jewish, Muslim, and Christian faith. Daniella Saar is a mother, wife, sister, daughter, friend, educator, lactation consultant, and poet living in Jaffa, Israel, and I am so grateful for her testimony of this really difficult time here in Israel. The first hashtag that I remember from like after October 7th was the Me Too, except if you're a Jew.
Yes.
You know who started that, by the way?
I actually have no idea. I think that it's genius. And I remember that the first time that I saw it, it actually pissed me off because I think that it reflected something that I didn't want it to be true. And, you know, the first few days after October 7th, they were so chaotic and scary. And we were very much dealing with checking in our communities and people that we know and trying to help with the best of our abilities. So it actually took me like a few days to realize that I'm hearing nothing from the international community. And when I do hear something, it wasn't clear enough. It was backhanded. It was trying to legitimize extreme violence. So I remember that when I saw this hashtag, it pissed me off because I felt like there's no way it's real, right? I'm just not looking in the right places. I'm not following maybe the right people. But then I just started to realize that the international community turned their backs on us. And that was pretty devastating.
What was your interaction with like feminist groups abroad, you know, like before October 7th? Did you have like feminist friends that lived overseas that were like not Jewish or maybe even Jewish, but like anti-Zionist, or, you know, what was your like understanding of the international community when it comes to, let's just say like Israel in general, and then women's issues in Israel?
Well, I would say that my activism is usually far more localized. I try to deal with everything that is within the Israeli territories because this is where I live. So I feel that this is where I'm the most impactful. And for a few years, I used to volunteer, and now I'm in the board of directors of the Survivors of Sexual Violence Advocacy Group. It does not roll up your tongue. And I just saw that other international organizations are just not speaking up. So I wasn't necessarily personally involved with them, but our CEO definitely knew some of those people, or that she met them, or that she was in touch with them. And, you know, I think that today in this like age of the global village and everybody has a smartphone, you know, there are people who consider themselves feminists or people who are involved with women's issues that I follow online. And we see ourselves as a part of the same community because we use the same hashtags and we are involved with the same issues, or at least somewhat familiar with them. And then I just saw that those people, they're saying nothing, or that they're saying really misinformed things. And then it just seemed like it's getting to be this like social thing, that they are a part of a specific group, so they need to stick to a certain code of conduct or speech. And within that speech, you cannot support Jewish people, not to mention Jewish women, not to mention the Israeli community. And all of a sudden, like Zionist is this very popular slur. And the things that also we heard coming up from international communities, what was happening on college campuses and on Jewish communities abroad, it was just very frightening.
So you were in Tel Aviv the morning of October 7th, correct?
Yes, I live in Jaffa, and technically Jaffa and Tel Aviv is the same city, although I don't feel the same way. But yes, I live in Jaffa, and the morning of October 7th, it's a Saturday, so it's what would be in the Christian world like a Sunday. Like it's the day off. It's a day of chillness, and it was also like a holiday, so really nothing planned out. It was after this long streak of Jewish holidays, so it's like that day before your kids go back to school and you're like, oh, I'm so done, I'm so over this. Like 3 weeks of vacation, and it was just a Saturday morning, and we're waking up from this siren which sounds bizarre, but actually in Israel, it's pretty common. Like every now and then a siren will go on and it tells you that you need to get to a safe space immediately. Where I live, it means that you have 90 seconds, which is considered to be a long period of time to get to the safe space. For us, it's the staircase. So I just got out of bed and took my kid, and my husband joined us, and we were sitting in the stairs. We were waiting the appropriate time period before we get back to our apartment. And then we just got back home and started scrolling because you want to know what happened. And we realized that something very unusual is going on, because the sirens didn't only go on in Tel Aviv, it was going on in multiple areas in Israel. And we see that around the Gaza Strip, it was going nonstop. And then we started receiving videos of people just taking a video outside of their window in the city of Sderot, and you see tourists with machine guns driving down the street, shooting. And we realized that there's also terrorist infiltration, not just massive rockets attacked. And with social media and WhatsApp and Telegram, it's so easy to pass on information. So we also started realizing that just something very chaotic is going on, because the news were so far behind from what was going on from the footage that we've seen. And we started to understand that something very unusual, something that is unprecedented, actually, is going on.
And so then how many days or hours was it until you understood that there was something at a music festival, that there was infiltration at the kibbutzim? Like how many hours elapsed before you and like I said, like most people in Israel kind of understood the extent of what had happened?
Pretty much immediately. Israel is a very small country. We're almost reaching 10 million people. I think it's similar to the size and population of New Jersey, for my understanding. It's a very small country. So if you don't know somebody that's under attack right now, you know somebody who knows somebody who's under attack. So basically, as we scroll, we also see people that we know that are right now under physical threats. Friends of mine that are in the kibbutzim around the Gaza Strip, hiding in their safe rooms. I didn't have friends personally in the Nova Festival, but so quickly the footage of it came out. And not to mention that when tourists infiltrated the kibbutzim, they took people's personal cell phones and they started filming videos of them executing people. There are people that got online and saw their family members being executed or being held at gunpoint, threatened by the terrorists. Extreme violence. I think that you could pretty much ask yourself, like, what is your worst nightmare? Like when your worst panic attack or anxiety kicks in and you started thinking about like the worst things that could possibly happen. And then when the anxiety attack wears off and you just feel like, okay, this is just like really intrusive thoughts, but this is not reality. So that was the ongoing reality of October 7. And we were just scrolling. I found myself scrolling on my phone and I see our homeopath posting a post that says, my nephews are currently hiding in the closet. They say that their parents were shot and the infant was also shot. Could somebody just rescue them? And they hid for hours in that closet until somebody rescued them. And the parents were murdered and the infant was abducted to the Gaza Strip. She was released, thankfully, in the hostage deal.
So for people who don't have, if you do have friends and family in Israel, you know that everybody knows each other, right? It's like one big family and the military is your family. It's not a voluntary military service. So it's like the military literally is your family. There's no separation. So it really is one big family. So when I first heard that people were denying that there were murders and rapes. Like I immediately was like, you don't have a friend or family in Israel, because if you did, you would know someone who knows someone, because that's just the thing. Everyone, like I'm not, like I'm here now, but I wasn't here for October 7th. And my first few weeks here, I met up with my aunt, and she brought a friend, and her friend, casually says, my daughter is a survivor of the Nova Festival. It's like that's how impacted everyone here is. So like to deny, like to say that there's no proof, or that it's all montage, or that it was a curated I mean, I was seeing so many things, that it was like footage from other wars, and it was actors, and just all of the lies. It's, to me, it revealed that, well, one, there's like something much deeper going on, but two, that this would be an impossible thing to fake, because of how connected everyone is. Right?
Yes.
It's not just like the population lives in one area, and there's this amorphous, like population that lives in a farther distant land where no one's ever been, and they don't really actually know what goes on, but they hear that there's this thing. It's like it was so it was such an intimate is not the best word, but
It is, though, I think. And I think that we've talked about this before, but for me, what made it so horrific and nightmarish in the sense of like your own personal terror that you could only be inflicted on within your wildest dreams, was the fact that it was so familiar. It was so familiar. There are now two people that are hostage. One of them is named just like me, Daniella. Another one is named Nimrod, just like my son. This is so familiar. Those faces of the hostages, those are familiar faces. And it doesn't really matter if I personally know them, but they are such Israeli faces, and those locations, they are familiar. I used to live for 1 year around the Gaza Strip. The road that was infested with terrorists that day, Road 232, is one of my favorite roads in Israel, because I used to drive there every week, and I lived there for a year. And it's, if you ever had like this, I don't know, this like adventure as a teenager, as a youth, and there's like this place that if you go to, it immediately takes you back to when you were 18 and when you were the most free and adventurous. Like, this is driving down this road to me. And when me and Yael Scherer, the CEO of our lobby, when we drove down to Beirut to see it, I was petrified about driving down that road, because so many people lost their lives encountering terrorists on that road. It's so familiar. And when it comes to saying that there's no proof and denying what happened, I think that there's levels to it. I don't think that everybody who's denying what happened, this is not necessarily the same sin. Like, there's definitely like the vain, delusional Roger Waters that will just sit down and very comfortably deny everything and being very anti-Semitic about it. And I think that there's also a lot of misinformation out there, which is somewhat reasonable, because in the first few days, everything was so chaotic, to the extent of we had too many dead bodies for the Israeli authorities to handle. It took us weeks to identify bodies. We did not have enough flowers available for funerals. A family member of mine started this project of just people volunteering to create flower arrangements for funerals, because there was so many, and we didn't have the resources to have so many funerals per day. So there was a lot of misinformation. And yes, we also live in a time where you could use footage from different time and place. We live in a time of AI, and we live in time when we are aware of the hidden or not so hidden agendas of mainstream media. So I can understand why something so horrific yet intimate seems to people that it doesn't make sense. I still don't believe that what has happened and what's happening still is the reality of our lives. It's a daily reminder that this is actually real.
Wow, the flower thing is insane. That's just one aspect of it that never crossed my mind, because why? And it just really, wow. It's just so it just illustrates, yeah, what you're talking about, just the magnitude and the lack of infrastructure, that there aren't even enough flowers to
Yes.
accommodate such a horrific
Yes.
event.
And at a certain point, when she ran out of flowers, they started make arrangements out of just branches. They tried to make it as beautiful and as respected as possible, but at a certain point, she even ran out of the flowers themselves. And she's exporting flowers, like she's working with the people that grow them. It seems insane. We did not have the facilities to collect and to identify the bodies. People brought toothbrushes and anything that contained DNA of their family members so they could be identified. And I'm very trying to be respectful for people's tragedies, and not to mention things that are too horrific. But I'm saying that people brought items containing DNA because the bodies were in such a poor state that they were unrecognizable. We had to bring in agriculture experts, people that do like the practical work of digging, to help identify bones, because in some cases bodies were burned so bad that only some bones were left, and they were very difficult to locate and to identify. So this is something very, very horrific and gruesome. And I think that also Israeli people that are trying to tell the world what happened, they're also being very cautious, because the details that we have and the pictures that we have, they are so very grotesque. And we try to be respectful for people and their family, especially when it comes to families, when it comes to women, when it comes to children. We need to be respectful of them, because they were people with lives, entire worlds.
You know, we're recording this just 2 days after a Druze village was hit, and 12 children were killed. And not in the case of Druzim, because I'm actually not familiar of what is required or like customary for burial, but like when we're talking about Jewish people, it's very important to bury the whole body as well.
Yeah.
So this presented, from what I understand, maybe you can talk a little bit more about this, but this presented a whole other moral, I guess, dilemma of like when to bury, like when is the point where we decide we have enough of this person to do a burial. Can you talk a little bit about
Yes.
that?
Yes, I will start by saying that Israeli is a religious country, in the sense that some of our state institutes are run by religious law. So it's that way with the Marital Institute, and it's the same with the burial. So the burial in Israel of the Jewish community, of the Jewish population, is made by Orthodox Jews, and there are Orthodox laws about Jewish burial, and definitely there is a criteria and specific of what it takes to bury a person, what is enough of a body to bury a person. And October 7th was definitely a very troublesome event regarding that. There were also a variation of situations in that, within that. We had, this is difficult. We had families burned down together. So we need to identify the different family members to distinguish between them as we bury them. And perhaps in some cases, people will decide to bury the family together as the one unit. This is one instance that I can recall. We found a person's bone, but we don't know whose bone it is. So the state of Israel is using a lot of resources trying to identify who this person is. And in the case that I'm talking about right now, we ended up realizing that this person was actually a terrorist that burned himself down while bringing in all the gasoline. They wanted to extend. So the burning down is not just burning down, it's burning to the ground. It's burning so there's nothing left. And this person found himself trapped within the fire that he himself started. So there were so many resources trying to identify who this person actually is until we realized that this person was a terrorist and not another person that used to live in this house, and we didn't find his body. Later on, we learned that the body was abducted into the Gaza Strip, and it's currently there. So there are cases where families decided to have a burial without the body because they do not know when the body will be returned to Israel, because Hamas is not returning it at its own free will. So we need to negotiate over the body or to rescue it. So we had cases in which we had very much late burials, and some families, they did not start the mourning process of sitting Shiva, for example, until the body was brought back. So these are just like three different scenarios that I can think about, but there were so many. There were so many
images, like the images that were shown internationally. Yes. Like maybe we can get into the image of Shani Louk, which created a lot of different conversations and ethical dilemmas, and from what you've shared a little bit with me about like lawsuits. For those who aren't familiar with Shani Louk, would you tell us a little bit about her story in regards to October 7th?
So I think that October 7th, like any other major event, there are some images that become iconic. And sadly, one of those iconic images is Shani Louk, may her memory be a blessing, her body being thrown into a car and paraded in Gaza Strip. When I say paraded, I mean that people spit on it, abuse it, and the body in those images, it does not seem to be a body of a living woman. The position of the body, angles, it does not seem as if she's alive or at least conscious. And she was abducted, but for a long time, it was unclear what is her status. And also people trying to be very hopeful. There were people that were hoping that she's severely injured, yet alive. Moving forward for a few weeks later, a bone was found within the Gaza Strip. It was taken to the lab, and it was a bone from her skull that apparently is critical for a body to be alive. So through the finding of that bone, it was declared that she died. Her body was there. It was rescued by the IDF a few weeks ago, and she was brought to burial. And one of the disturbing things that happened on October 7 was that among terrorists and so-called civilians that infiltrated Israel, there were journalists or photographers. I really struggle with recalling them by professional name because I find their involvement in the situation to be very suspicious. But people were there taking pictures of her body, and that picture was shown on Reuters, and that photo ended up winning awards.
That photo was taken once she was already in Gaza.
From what it seems, from the scenario around, it seems as if she's already in the Gaza Strip, but we have also photographers that were there with them as they walked in. This photographer is walking around taking pictures of a woman's dead body being abused. And the fact that this image is just so nonchalantly being published, to me, this is abusing women's bodies in the most disrespectful, evil way possible. I mean, we can talk about the endless ways in which the media is using women's body, but this picture being taken in those circumstances is a red flag for us, I feel, as a humanity. As media consumers, if we want to get down to the truth, does this mean that any action is allowed, is moral, is ethical? And at the end of the day, people gained out of this picture. People made profit. People advanced in their careers because of her paraded body.
And this photographer, with quotes, / journalist with quotes, however we want to refer to them, is this someone who identifies as like a Palestinian?
This is a Palestinian living in the Gaza Strip. Reuters claim that he's a freelancer, so they do not hire him. So they had no way of knowing about the attack, and hiring him on freelance terms denies them of their responsibility regarding October 7th. Now there are family members that are suing them in Israeli court. They're suing Reuters about the use of this picture. So I think that it's very interesting what they're saying about, okay, this person is freelance, so we are not accountable. And it just seems like nobody is accountable to benefiting out of a dead woman being paraded.
And by comparison, the process in Israel, from my understanding, is that when there are videos and photos made available to the Israeli government of hostages, dead or alive, they ask for consent from the families to show them. Is that correct?
Yes, this is correct. And I do want to distinguish between government and a global media corporate. I do not think they are the same, but I do find this disturbing in the sense of corporate responsibility and media responsibility. It comes... I'm so pissed off. I'm literally running out of words, but I do feel that media is definitely taking advantage of the situation, first of all, in the way that it's framing the narrative, and then by using our bodies and our stories and our tragedies. I don't know if necessarily a media corporate should be held to the same standards of a government, but the fact that a media corporate is actively trying to not be accountable for something like that is disturbing. And during October 7th, women's bodies were abused and violated and mutilated, and we need to live with that as a community, as a nation. We need to find a way to live with that. And I am not okay in living in a world in which, on the one hand, it's so easy to deny what has happened to us and what is still happening to women that are kept hostage in Gaza, because for some women, this is still the ongoing reality. And on the other hand, media can just do whatever it wants.
And there are currently 120 hostages still? Is that correct?
Last week it was 120, and 5 bodies of hostages were rescued. So now it's 115. And we have women there. We have young women. We have a mother that was taken with her 2 children. Shiri Bibas, she was taken with her 2 sons, Ariel, that was 4 at the time, and Kfir, that was 9 months at the time. The father was taken separately from them, and we don't know what happened to them.
What do you think of the rescue mission of the 4 hostages that were rescued? And also, just to distinguish for listeners, there are hostage deals and then there are rescues. Maybe about a month ago, was it, that 4 hostages were rescued by the IDF? One of them was a young woman named Noah, who also was one of the, how do I say it, featured hostages. Her face was shown many times, internationally, and I was curious about that, why that
It's a
was,
good
but
question. Why
yeah.
why she became so familiar?
Yeah, I have my theories of why. I like my assumptions of why that was. Like, her mom was dying of cancer, is now deceased. She was able to see her mother before she died, but still just a total tragedy to be away from your mother in her final months of life. Maybe like a kind of a desperate plea on, like, on Israel's part, to say, like, see, like, even like not full Jews were taken, or like, Americans were taken too, or like her mom is Asian, and her dad is Israeli Jew, and like, see, like, it's not just Jews that were taken. Like, maybe if we show you that it wasn't just, quote, Zionists who were taken, then you'll maybe have more empathy or more understanding that this is like a human rights crisis. Americans were taken. So, like, yeah, I thought, and she's also, I mean, all of the souls, the women, the men that were taken are beautiful, but I think she was particularly striking. It's
I think
just
it
a
was
beautiful
mostly the video of her abduction.
on the
Noah
motorcycle.
Noah was at the Nova Festival with her boyfriend, and in the video of her abduction, you can see her, just like, her petrified face
Yeah.
as she's being separated from her boyfriend and being taken away on a motorcycle, and her hands reach out to him in a plea, and then the camera turns back to him, and he's also petrified, surrounded by terrorists. There's obviously nothing that he can do. This is also one of those things that it feels unreal. It's such a cinematic moment, and this
Yeah.
is also part of the disturbing aspects of it, like terrorists infiltrating Israel wearing body cameras and spreading that video was released that day itself. They were taking pictures with their body cameras, with their cell phones, with cell phones of Israelis that they have stolen, and then this footage is out there. It immediately became iconic because it's such a strong emotional moment, and I think that this is what made her initially
Mm.
so popular. Like Shiri Bibas, the mother that I referred to, she's carrying her 2 children in a sling, and they're both redheads, so both of their hairs of their heads are showing off from her body as she's pressing them against her, trying to protect them, and she's also very scared. I think that there's something about that became that those images, they become iconic. And Noah is also one of the most popular names in Israel. I think that it's also a part of that. It's so easy to relate. She has these features that are, yes, they are striking because her mother is Asian and her father is Israeli, but her name is so familiar. Like, I know about 20 Noahs, if not more.
Yeah.
Um, the rescue mission, I'm so happy that they managed to rescue them alive, because the logistics and the details of such a mission, they are so complicated. So many things can go wrong. Things did go wrong. Arnon Zamora, that now this operation is named after him, was killed during the mission, but all the hostages were able to get out of there alive. I'm very much happy that it came to be, because I can really think of nothing worse than being hostage by Hamas. And she was able to have last few days, almost a month with her dying mother. So it also, yes, it was a relief. When I say that, like, Israel is like a small family, we would every now and then see another footage of Noah's mother pleading for her release, and you could see her declining. So it was heartbreaking, and everybody just hoped that she'd be able to say goodbye to her mother, and she did. And also, the 3 men that were rescued, they were rescued from one apartment, and Noah was held in a different apartment. She was by herself. We know that she wasn't by herself the entire time, but for a significant amount of time, she was held captive by herself. So this is very troubling to try to think of what she experienced when she was alone, when she saw other hostages being executed.
Right.
And this is something that she says that has happened. So I'm very much hoping that she will be able to. I don't know. I don't know if I can say, like, heal from this. I don't know if you can really heal from this. I hope that she will find happiness.
Mm-hmm.
I really wish the very best for her and for every hostage.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned part of her account of witnessing other hostages be executed in front of her, but can you share some of her account? Because also some of I'm having trouble as a non-Hebrew speaker finding like lots of English sources for when the hostages do speak like on Israeli news. Like it's not always translated or with English subtitles. So yeah, any part of her testimony that you read or heard that you would like to share?
So Noah herself did not testify to a great extent. There are some things that she refers to, but she's not very outspoken at the moment. We do have testimonies of other hostages that were released. What they are sharing is deeply disturbing, and I find them to be very courageous and brave in sharing those things, because I assume that recalling and speaking of those things is not what you want to do when you return from captivity. But what they're sharing is very, very disturbing. We have a young woman called Agam. She's 17 years old, and she's sharing in great detail the reality of being kept hostage and her encounters with other female hostages, what she saw, what she heard. She's very outspoken about the sexual abuse that is going on and her great fear being abused sexually. And we also know from Amit Sosna, who is a hostage that has been released, that she was sexually abused at gunpoint. She shares in detail.
She's the one who was featured in the New York Times, I think, right? She's like in her maybe late 40s, late 30s. Yes. Okay.
Yes. She was there's also a famous video of her fighting off the terrorist as she's being taken.
Yes, with a group of them. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes, a group of, I don't know, they're like 6, I think, terrorists trying to take her, and they're also covering herself with a blanket, so she's more easily taken away, and she's just fighting them off physically, which is I think she's amazing. I really think that she's amazing, and she came back and she shared her experience of being sexually abused at gunpoint. We know from another hostage, if I remember correctly, from Shir Segal, that the terrorists are dressing up the hostages in clothes that they favor, and that they touch them as they please.
Disgusting.
Yes, she says that they use them as dolls, as their playthings. There is also a grave concern now that more than 9 months has passed. It is a grave concern to what is the reality of being a fertile woman. Not that long ago, the families of the observers, and I can explain in depth later what it is, but their families released a video of a body cam of terrorists from the abduction from their military base, and you can hear the terrorists saying, "These are the women that could get pregnant." And they are saying that when the bodies of their friends are still there, some of these young women are wounded. There's blood on their face. You can see that they've been hit. Some of them are trying to talk and to rationalize with the terrorist, which is amazing. They're so brave. So we are very much worried about what is going on with these young women. And also from what we know from bodies that were found from people that were hiding while the terrorist attack was happening on October 7, we have extremely disturbing testimonies of sexual abuse to its worst actions that one might think: mutilation, dismembering, gang rape, executions.
What kind of support is there for survivors, like witnesses, survivors, the returned hostages? I mean, what?
This is something that the advocacy group is dealing with deeply, what are the services that the state of Israel can provide. So I would say that first and foremost, everybody that were involved in this event, rather if they are the victims of the sexual abuse itself or if they just witness it, those are people that are dealing with extent and complicated trauma. Some of them can't work. Some of them are struggling to function. Some of them, they have families, they have obligations. Some of them have family members or friends or community members that are still in Gaza, or many friends and families that were murdered in the attacks. So these are people that are basically trying to just recover from what happened. So it's about financial aid for those who can't work at the moment. It's about providing them with the mental care that they need. And I would say that even before October 7, we did not have enough mental health providers and services available. So this is definitely worse. Right now, we know that the returned hostages are under medical care, and they are being looked after for and monitored after also. Those are people that some of them were wounded and were not treated properly when they were held hostages. Some of them are malnourished. They lost a lot of weight and they need to recover physically. Not to mention the physical implications of trauma. People are struggling to eat, to sleep. This is very concerning. And right now we have teams that are working on gathering the evidence and criminalizing terrorists that are held prisoners in Israel for their crimes. And we are under the greatest ongoing investigation for sexual violence.
I want to go back to the denial and they deserved it, or this is like finally, analogies that I had heard is this is, you're raped so many times. This is like finally having the guts to kill your rapist. These are some of the things that I was hearing that to justify the level of violence and atrocities that were committed against Israelis and also people who are here who are actually international, not even Israelis. As someone who you have your own criticisms of the government, I'm sure. Like, how did you? I think that's also, I just want to say that's a really big misconception about Israelis is that they are unanimous in their political beliefs. Like, it shocks
Somebody who
people.
thinks that never met Jewish people. You say that there's two Jewish people in the room, there's three opinions.
That's so funny. That's so
And
funny. No,
true.
it's really in my experience, it started when I grew up in New York City. I went to super like liberal schools, university as well. Into my adulthood, I was in super liberal circles up until about, maybe 6 years ago. But if I said I was Jewish or even had lived in Israel, it was immediate interrogation. Oh, are you into that Zionist shit? Someone said that to me a woman said that to me at a women's festival just because she overheard me say that I'd lived in Tel Aviv. So there's already so much story and judgment. Like everyone thinks that they know about
Yes.
Israel. I mean, it's built into the institution. It is an indoctrination. It is institutionalized to within liberal education to be anti-Zionist. I grew up around a lot of Jews also that were anti-Zionist who would go to anti-Zionist camps and like it's a big thing I would say in the Northeast in particular. So I think I said this to a friend. I felt like we were starting at like negative 1,000 when October 7th, occurred in terms of understanding Israel, the diversity of politics in Israel, of thought, of just the literal diversity within Israel in terms of the population, despite it being a Jewish state. So maybe, yeah. So I'm curious, like, were you shocked that you were like about the rape is resistance or they deserved it? Or had you kind of grown up with an understanding that no, like a lot of people hate Israelis and think Jews are at the root of all evil of the world or that, Israel is this imperialist
Mhm.
monster.
Yeah. I was aware that, I was very aware that Israel is unpopular and that is misunderstood, and that the reality of this place is very much flattened. And I knew those things already. I just think that what really shook me was how fast and immediate and with really zero thought, just like in an automatic response of blaming Israel for October 7th. And, you know, my my existence in this world is thanks to Holocaust survivors. So the Jewish trauma and persecution lives in my body, lives in my DNA. So the Holocaust always fascinated me, and I studied it. And I always felt like, okay, Nazi ideology and its realization in the world is so bizarre, yet I felt like I could understand that. Never relate to it, never follow it, but I felt like I could understand Nazi ideology or people who followed Nazi ideology. But what I didn't understand was how come so many people that were not Nazi and did not follow Nazi ideology, or how just the international community complied. I did not understand that. And then October 7th happened. And I'm like, okay, people just don't care about Jewish people. Some of them are anti-Semitic. Some of them are proud anti-Semitic. But the vast majority of them, they just don't care about Jews. And then I think it very much falls into this like social game that I said before. Okay, if I am a liberal and I have liberal friends and I have a liberal community, and the stance within that community is to hate Israel. So when something happens in Israel, I am automatically against Israel. And you just see people being useful idiots for terrorist organizations. And I gotta say, for people who live outside Israel who are listening to this, I really think that you should be concerned about the support of terrorist organization within your local communities. This should disturb you, because beyond the idea of what should be the fate of this country, rather you prefer calling it Israel or Palestine. Personally, I do not care how you call this country and what your stance are. But if you start going around and saying that there is a country in this world that does not have the right to exist, and you support the annihilation of its people, that means that a terrorist organization got to you. The fact that this way of thinking is so normalized and people just walk around proudly saying that the state of Israel should not exist. And we see the manifestation of that, in the Eurovision, Eden Golan going on stage. How many people are booing her and other contestants, how they behaved in the press conferences, this like bullying behavior that is obviously not only not supporting the Palestinian people, which is fine if you emphasize with their pain, and there's a lot of pain there. I'm not denying that at all. But those behaviors, they are just anti-Israel. They do not help in any way the Palestinian community. And it's just being mean. It's just being a bully. And I don't get what's the point. Even if you do boo this woman off the stage, did that help a starving Palestinian child? Did that liberate the Palestinian people from a terrorist organization? Did that bring peace to the Middle East? And to me, the greatest concern is that those people, they're not really interested in a peaceful resolution. They want Jews to be gone. And you hear like silly stuff about like, go back from where you came from. Okay, so I have a grandmother from Poland, I have a grandfather from Argentina, and I have a grandmother that is like few generations Bukhari from Jerusalem. Do you cut me in pieces and distribute me? Do I get to pick where to go? And how far back does this go back to where you came from apply? Because Arabs came here too in the 7th century. And America, most of the people that live there today, their ancestors are not from there as well.
Correct.
And all the Syrian refugees, do they need to go too? It's just being anti-Semitic for the sake of being anti-Semitic, because now this is very rewarding to be anti-Semitic. And now I just feel like, okay, those things came up, and now I feel like, okay, now I understand what we're dealing against with. It's not about women's rights. It's about being a part of a political stance.
Have your politics changed since the war?
It's a good question. I mean, I guess that it has. I feel like I want to say that I don't think that it's changed. I feel like it's more accurate or whatever. Listen, reality has changed. So I feel like people who feel exactly the same before October 7 and after, I think that it's really, really weird, because reality has changed. Like, we are now living in a reality in which I'm like, if I need to hide my son, where do I hide my son? This is a thought that only Jewish people have. I thought that this Jewish thought will never occur in Israel. But my grandmother was hidden in an orphanage during World War II. So when this thought is actually a real thought. It's not just like this intrusive thought of a panic attack. These things can happen. It changes some of it. I think that my politics now, I don't know how to define them. I don't like playing the like left and right game. I feel like it's very limiting our choices and our ability to take responsibility over our feelings and actions that we want to take in the world. I definitely still do believe that there is no solution in which Palestinians or Israelis do not live here. I don't think that there's any solution that annihilates one of those two nations. And my son goes to a Hebrew Arab school because of that thought, because I think that if I think that in this future, also Israelis and also Palestinians live here, I need to embody that fully. So my son is studying in a school in which he speaks Hebrew and Arabic as well. And his schoolmates are Christian and Muslim and Jewish, and we celebrate all holidays. So yes, I do still believe in that, and I stand behind that decision still. I don't feel any need to change his education. I do, however, feel like if beforehand I would say that yes, Israel should do anything, should support anything, should pass anything. Right now, I'm feeling that we can no longer pretend that Gaza is not an enemy state. This is a terrorist organization that infiltrated Israel and created the greatest tragedy to the Jewish people since the Holocaust. So I feel that the world is still expecting Israel to support an enemy state. And I feel like that expectation by itself cannot bring peace. It's true, peace you make with your enemies, not with your friends. But I don't understand why are we expected to support an enemy state. And I don't understand why this support is not needed, is not asked from another country, Egypt, that is also bordered with the Gaza Strip. And for some reason, they are not being asked to help. And there are all the Arab countries that are our neighbors and are so, not only to mention that they are attacking us daily, they are so very easy to say that this is a problem that Israel should solve. But in your countries, you have Palestinian people as well. So if you do stand in solidarity with those people, why aren't you helping them? And why do you blame the evil Zionists for not helping or not helping enough? Because even when we do help, we don't help enough.
Right.
So in this game, Israel is always losing because it's or that we do nothing or that we don't do enough. But to me, the greatest change was understanding the extent of terror within the Gazan population. I wanted to believe that there is a terrorist organization that is running this place for 20 years and to think, okay, there is government and there is people, and the government does not necessarily represent the people. But things that we witnessed on October 7 and things that hostages talk about as they return share the great depth of civilians being involved. Families with children and even babies locked down hostages within their homes, raided Israel and stole and lit things on fire and witnessed people being mutilated. So I feel like I don't know anymore what is the distinction between a terrorist and a civilian. And I really wish that I did, because I do believe that people in their entity, they are good. A baby that is being born is good. There's nothing bad, there's nothing evil about the baby being born. But when a nation is celebrating something like what has happened in October 7th, I just feel like I chose to look the other way from a reality that I didn't want to fully understand, or maybe I romanticized that it was more to my liking than it actually was. So I feel like I am very much still hoping and advocating for peace. I don't know what this peace is going to look like. I don't think that this like equation of territory will bring peace is the right equation, because Israel left the Gaza Strip 20 years ago. And it did not bring us peace. So I'm just feeling like everything that we thought that we knew, all the solutions that we thought that were possible before October 7th showed to not be true. And I am very much curious about realizing what the solutions are. Because I don't want war. I don't think that it's benefiting anybody.
Is there anything else we didn't get to that you want to say?
First of all, I want to thank everybody that has listened. I don't think that it's like the popular choice right now to listen to an Israeli speaking of her experience right now. So I want to thank people that tuned in. And I want to thank you not only for tuning in, but for bearing witness. Because our truth is being misinformed and underrepresented. And bearing witness is something very important. I feel like this is my obligation. This is the thing that I can do right now. I take it upon myself to listen to as much as I can and read as much as I can, and still maintaining my mental health, because it is very devastating. So I really want to thank everybody that has been tuning in. And I want to say that if you found this topic important to you, and if you want to help in any way, there are organizations that you can donate to. You could contact with your local representatives and remind them that there are 115 hostages still kept under a terrorist organization called Hamas, and to advocate for their release. And you could share with other people what you've heard today.
Absolutely. Yes. And I will I'll add some links in the episode show notes for people who want to read English testimonies, and we'll link some groups as well.
Yes, I just want to end, if it's okay, with the names of the women that are still held hostage in Gaza.
Please.
Okay, yes. So, Agam Berger, 19. Emily Damari, 28. Arbelia Yudai, 29. Judy Weinstein, 17. Doron Steinwercher, 31. Daniela Gilboa, 20. Carmel Gat, 40. Liri Alberg, 19. Maya Gonen, 56. Naama Levi, 20. Eden Yerushalmi, 24. Inbar Heyman, 27. Ofra Keidar, 70. Karina Ariev, 19. Romy Gonen, 23. Shiri Bibas, 33.
Thank you so much, Daniella, for bringing all this information to the world, to my audience specifically, who has been curious and waiting for coverage on this issue. And yeah, I appreciate your time, and also reliving, talking about some of the real horrors of the day and the days following. So I appreciate you.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend or family member who needs to hear this content. And if you do share it on social media, don't forget to follow and tag me at Whose Body Is It? So until next time.